the dialectics of black revolution, the struggle to defeat the counterinsurgency in the U.S. Omali Yashitela speaks African internationalism, political theory for our time, and more recently, One Africa, One Nation. So please give it up for Omali Yashitela.
Uhuru is Swahili word for freedom. It was a word, slogan, demand that was popularized by the Kingdom Land Freedom Army, known popularly as Mau Mau, an organization that fought an incredibly significant struggle for independence against the British in Kenya. That made African people worldwide proud to be African. Whether we lived in the Caribbean, whether we lived in the United States or on the continent of Africa itself. Uhuru became a slogan that thrilled all of us, because all of us were then oppressed just as we are now oppressed, though we may not be as aware of it today as we were then. I would like to express my profound appreciation to the organizers of this first conference of the African Student Association, to a wonderful president, Sister Sarah, to Sister Abba, and others who have shown us this incredibly powerful African hospitality. I also want to express my appreciation to the comments, for the comments just made by Professor Dave. And I see here in the audience, who is also, I understand, part of this program, Professor who I had a great pleasure to meet, I think it was in October of last year, who is a wonderful subversive in these institutions. I think just engaging the system in powerful contest of ideas, which is absolutely necessary to forward our movement for genuine freedom here and around the world. I am also, in addition to the other things mentioned, the chairman of the African Socialist International, which is an organization of African revolutionaries in various parts of the world. It is a consequence of having come to the conclusion that the struggle for black power, for black freedom, has run into its limitations when fought within the context of borders that have been created for us by imperialism. Whether in Africa, those false borders, whether in the Caribbean, the United States, here in Canada. Acceptance of those borders greatly impede any struggle that we want to make for our freedom. Here in Canada, in the United States, we're spoken of as minorities, and we think as minorities, and as a consequence of that, we do not have the confidence in our capacity to win freedom for ourselves, a future for our children. In Haiti, wonderful, magnificent, glorious Haiti, where there are only 9 million of us, to have to stand alone because they are so-called Haitians, while there are African people all around the world who are confused about this question. To have to stand alone after Haiti has done so much for the struggle of black people and peoples in general. Haiti, that won its freedom at a time when the entire world economy revolved around African slavery. Haiti, that could not be tolerated as a successful example precisely because the world economy revolved around sucking the blood of Africa and oppressed peoples around the world, and Haiti had successfully defied it, with the only successful slave revolt in the history of humanity. But having to stand alone, even today it does. But Haiti answered the question about the divide Because with this success, a success that defeated the mightiest army in the world at the time, defeated Napoleon's best troops at the time, and then did a constitution that said anybody, any slave, any oppressed person on the planet Earth, you get to Haiti, you're free. Haiti. That was the vanguard of the struggle for black freedom and human freedom anywhere else. Haiti, that supported Simon Bolivar in the struggles that he was waging throughout South America, with the condition, of course, that with your success you free people who are enslaved. Haiti, that inspired the Mexican Revolution, particularly once Guerrero, who became the first African Indian president of Mexico, came into slavery and wanted to fund an expedition of Africans from Haiti to go to Cuba to free black people there. No question about some divide. I think that when we talk about this issue of the divide, that we should not be seduced into assuming that this is simply an abstract question, that we have the luxury of being able to debate this issue. The fact is that we are impoverished and oppressed all over the continent of Africa. On the continent of Africa, you have a situation where at least half the people or more live off less than $1 a day. In Africa, in so-called sub-Saharan Africa, people exist off less than $1 a day, while a cow in Europe is subsidized for $2 a day, which means a cow in Europe is better off than a black person on the continent of Africa. In Haiti, in the Caribbean, our people lived off, they talk about the earthquake, but before the earthquake, there were reports of our people living, eating mud pies. So we luxuriate in the notion of somehow there being a difference between a starving African in the Caribbean and a starving African in Sierra Leone, where they bring up the best diamonds on earth in Sierra Leone. But the ones who bring the diamonds up are lucky if they get 30 cents a day and a cup of rice. It is a luxury that we cannot afford, the so-called idea of the divide between us. Because the fact of the matter is that there are 1.5 billion African people on earth. But the success of our oppressor is keeping us starving and poor. Without a future, is their success in keeping us divided. The assumption that somehow we are different. I just want to say, I know we only have a few minutes, so in these few minutes, first of all, the question, the debate was resolved many years ago. There was an incredible leader that was referenced by Professor Day when he talked about Marcus Garvey, who was not an academician. In fact, many of those in the academy from our communities hated Garvey's guts because his struggle was on the ground, on the earth, and was tied to the future and fate of ordinary black folks like your parents and relatives and neighbors and what have you. And he built a movement, came out of Jamaica and went into New York City and built a movement from 6 to 11 million African people worldwide. A magnificent anti-imperialist movement that has never been seen since. Anything like that has never been seen since. Garvey did that. From Jamaica to America, and everywhere on Africa you found the Garvey movement struggling to change the world. So it is a question that in many ways has been resolved. Why isn't it that we don't know anything about the Garvey movement today? Why isn't it that the unity that was built through this organization doesn't exist today? It doesn't exist today because we live in a world where the economic and political configuration has been determined by parasitism.